It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I am your host for today's show, Devin Little, filling in for Kyle Knopp after my Western Michigan Broncos lost to his Michigan State Spartans in football last week. But that's okay because the Broncos are still better at hockey. And that's what we talk about in the show, right? Joining me for today's shenanigans is my line mate, Logan Horn. Logan, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Devin, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. The weekend is upon us.
Nice.
Also joining us on the show today is our producer, editor, you know the spiel at this point, Matthew Zator. Matt, it's good to see you as always. How you doing?
I should just join this show full time because I'm on it almost every. I'm doing good as always.
Yeah, I at this point, right? Before we begin our show today, is sponsored, of course, by the Morning Skate, the Hockey Writers daily newsletter filled with anything and everything hockey. If you love this sport as much as we do, be sure to sign up for the Morning Skate over at morningskate.io for free delivery to your inbox Monday to Friday. Also, be sure to drop us a like down there and subscribe if you're new to stay on top of all the best THW content. We are pumping out a lot of it now that we're in September and the preseason and training camp and all that stuff is upon us. All right, you know how we start this show. It is time for one good, one bad. I'm the host for today's show, so I'm going to go ahead and go first. My good is that the Red Wings will make 14 appearances on the national networks here in the States, being ESPN and TNT. And that ties them for the second most appearances amongst all the teams. That's pretty good. I think that's a glowing, glowing endorsement of the rebuild. And, Red Wings are an exciting team to watch, up and coming. I think that's crazy. And then on the bad, and we will talk about this a little bit later, but it's going to be my bad. Tim Stutzle signed that big old deal with the Ottawa Senators. And my very first thought, my second thought, actually, my first thought was about Lucas Raymond, but my second thought was, oh man, Dylan Larkin is going to cash in, isn't he? And I'm sure Steve Yzerman saw that and was like, all right, I see. So that's my my one good and my one bad. Matt, we will start with you on one good and one bad. What are your one good and one bad for the week?
Well, good is that week today, the Young Stars tournament happens in Penticton here, and Canucks are going to be in that for the first time. It's been 2 years since they've had the Young Stars tournament, which used to be before the pandemic, annual thing. So it's great to have that back, and all the prospect tournaments are starting up around that time. So that's exciting. We're going to see some young guys, prospects playing, and rosters are getting released for a lot of those tournaments. Traverse City has released. Obviously we talked about it last week. So it's fun, and that's my good, because hockey's 1 week closer, and now we are a week away from watching some hockey. So that's my good. My bad is that the Canucks signed Danny DeKeyser to a PTO, which makes I think no sense to me. But he's a left-hand shot. He's older. He's 32. I don't know if he really fits in Vancouver. The only thing I can really think of, he's a good penalty killer, so that may help the Canucks. As I was asking Logan before if he can play his offside. Apparently, he doesn't really plays offside, so I don't know how he fits in Vancouver. That's my bad. I guess it's a PTO. It's not a contract, so we'll see how he does, and he could surprise and be like Alex Chason and impress enough to make the team, and was pretty good throughout the year. So that's the hope. I guess there's no risk in it, but that's my bad. I was hoping for more of a right-hand shot being on the PTO. So, but former Red Wing, I guess, in Vancouver here now.
Selfishly, as a Bronco myself, I was pretty excited to see he got a shot somewhere. I agree, it's kind of a weird fit with Vancouver, but hey, you got to get your shot somewhere, right? Logan, over to you. What is your one good and one bad from the week?
Okay, well, first I'm going to mention something about DeKeyser and that PTO. I think part of it might be for the Canucks. They wanted to have a slightly more competitive defense core at training camp. And for DeKaiser, it's not just a tryout for the Canucks, it's a tryout for the whole league. So he might be looking for, just the opportunity where he saw a good fit to try out and get his name out there again. I don't know. It's a weird fit, but also preseason, you have to have a certain amount of veterans. So if they play him in the preseason, they can play more young guys. Maybe that's part of the thing for them. Anyway, my good is Marco Kasper has been killing it at the CHL, not the Canadian Hockey League, the Champions Hockey League, which is some of the top teams from all around Europe have this big tournament. Rogla won the tournament last year, actually, for the first time ever. They're playing there again. And yeah, Kasper had 6 points in 12 games last year, which was really impressive. In the first 3 games, he already has 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists. He's looked pretty solid, and it's kind of fun. It's such an early thing, such a small sample size, but people are already trying to find tweets where people are like, I don't know if Kasper is going to have any offense. And they're already trying to dunk on those people on Twitter and be like, well, look at this goal. So it should be a fun season ahead if that's, what's going to come. But anyway, my bad is it's just a preference thing. Sam Gagner signed a contract with the Winnipeg Jets. He's not coming back to Detroit. You could see it coming when they signed like a dozen contracts in 2 days at free agency, and he never got an extension. But he played a ton of minutes on the penalty kill last year. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how they fill that. I know Cobb is supposed to have some good minutes there, but that'll be interesting. It's just kind of a bummer. He's the team dad for a lot of people. So we'll see what happens there, but I'll miss him.
2 things off of that real quick. For those of you that do subscribe to the Morning Skate, we had a little, team conference, basically. We had 6 questions we had to answer. And I'll tell you right now that the player that the Red Wings are going to miss the most, it was unanimous, Sam Gagner. We're going to miss that guy. Team dad, absolutely. And then the other thing, I forgot it. So never mind. Let's just move on, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to continue on with our ongoing player preview series. This week, we are going to start with Pius Suter. The Swiss center is coming off of an all right season where he posted 36 points in 82 games while playing as the Red Wings' second line center. 26-year-old is also entering the final year of the 2-year deal he signed with Detroit last year. Logan, ended with you last time, so we're going to start with you this time. What are your expectations for Pius Suter in his second season with the Red Wings?
I just want him to score roughly the same amount of points, maybe 30. Higher than that would be a huge plus, but around 30 points, play a little bit better defensively because the team has improved and he's on the third line instead of the second. I think that's just like an automatic depth thing that is going to sort itself out and he's going to look even better. He was pretty good last year. They asked a lot of him as a second line center in just his second NHL season. Some people forget that he only played in Chicago for like half of 1 year and then played a full year in Detroit as a top 6 center, which is a pretty big ask. He is 26, I think, so it's not like he's 18, but still, it's a lot for someone who doesn't have the experience there. So you could kind of see it was a little too much pressure for him. It was a little too high of competition sometimes. So I think he'll thrive in a third line role. If he can just hit about 30 points, the depth is better there, so you'll play with some decent line mates still. And because the top 9 is pretty solid now when it comes to wingers. So just if he can hit those points, look a little bit improved, I'm happy with him being there for another couple of years if he wants to sign another contract and stay.
Interesting. Matt, do you agree with Logan? What do you think constitutes a successful season for Suter?
Yeah, a lot of what Logan said there. I mean, my biggest thing was looking at his faceoff percentage. It got better going over to Detroit, a little under 50%. It was 49.2, I believe it was. And if he's going to be the third line center, I mean, he's going to have to be good on faceoffs, and it depends on where Lalonde uses him. Like, I don't know if he's going to use him as like a matchup center or anything like that, but if he is put out there against the tougher competition, he's going to have to win draws. And 49% is, like I say, is okay, but I like the 52-ish, and that's, I think, good for me. At least that 50-51 at the very least, and I don't like the under 50% because it means you're not winning more than half your draws. So, I think, and the fact that he needs to maybe score a bit more, 15 goals is not horrible, but you look at what he did in Chicago, he had like 14 in like 50 games or something like that. It was a better, if you projected over 82 games, it would have been a lot more goals. So, if he can hit some, the thing is, in Chicago, he was playing with Pat Kane, I believe, quite a bit. So
that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yep.
So if he gets a better winger with him, I mean, with the talent that the Red Wings have now, he could have a better guy playing with him. So we'll see how he kind of does with the lineup, because if he has some more talent on his line, I think he has the potential of scoring a lot more. So he definitely has the talent, like you saw it in Chicago. But some guys, I've said this in the past, some guys just need talent around them to thrive, and not everyone can carry their own line. So I'm looking for, if he has some more, skill on his line, I think he can do a lot more. But if he's success would be doing at least what he did last year and just being a more well-rounded player overall.
Absolutely. Yeah. As much as I like Robbie Fabry and as much as I like Philip Zadina, neither of those guys are Patrick Kane. So yeah, you're going to take a hit. I know, a bold thing to say, probably the boldest thing I've ever said in the show. But I like what you, Matt, I like what you said there in regards to his usage and how Lalonde's going to use him, because I do think that's going to heavily affect what kind of season he has. If he is used in like in a third line role that is kind of like your stealth offensive line, where you're kind of just out there to take advantage of, like, a team's third defensive pairing and such, I think you could maybe project him for around 40 points, depending on who he's playing with. But as you say, if he's going to be in more of a matchup, maybe two-way type of role, that's going to affect it as well. You're not necessarily expecting him to put up as many points. You're kind of just expecting him to nullify the other team's line. And the thing is that I think he's perfectly capable of doing either. I think that he showed good offensive IQ throughout last year. He's not explosive by any means. I think his point totals showed that, but I do think that he knows where to be, and I think he can play with talented teammates, as he showed in Chicago. But then I also thought he did show a really strong two-way game. If they want him to be kind of a defensive specialist on the team, I think he can be that. It's just a matter of, who he's playing with, what role he's got. He's going to be a really interesting player to watch this season, I think, not only because he's on that last year of his contract, but also because he, pardon the expression here, because he's Swiss, but he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can kind of use him however you want to use him. So very intrigued to see how Lalonde use him and what that means for him in terms of what he does this season and whether or not he stays with the Red Wings. All right, great thoughts, everybody. Now let's turn our attention to the blue line. And we're going to talk about Gustav Lindstrom. We've talked about Suter. We've talked about Hronik. It's time to finish up that right side of the blue line. Gus Lindstrom is coming off of his first full season in the NHL, experiencing mixed results. He's the type of defenseman that is at his best when you hardly notice him. But does that mean that he could get lost in the shuffle this season? Matt, we're going to start with you this time. What are you looking for out of Lindstrom this season?
Well, just before coming on, I read a great article by you, Devin, that you wrote, I think it was like halfway through the season, about Lindstrom, and agree with a lot what you said. The thing is, he's not an offensive defenseman. Like, he's more that defensive guy, and that can match up with an offensive guy like Edmondson if he makes the team. I don't think he should be playing with Suter on the, as that first pairing, but if he can play that solid defensive game, like, he's not going to be a guy that's going to score a lot of goals. I believe only had one goal last year. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you're not expecting the goals to come from him. You're going to expect the better, more defensive oriented if he's not noticeable, he's doing his job.
Mhm.
And like you're saying about him being lost in the shuffle, I mean, he could definitely, but he's young, he's 23. So he's not going to be a guy that's going to be pushed out unless he plays horribly. I think he's going to still have a good spot. I think last year was his most games in his career. I think 60 something games, only was getting like 15 or so in the first 2 seasons. So, he's just coming off his first, I would say, first full NHL season. So he's just gonna have to keep building on it and play good defensively. Like I say, you're not gonna expect him to score goals. You're gonna expect him to be that good complementary guy for a more offensively oriented defenseman. So that's what I'm looking for from him. And you got to make sure to put that N in there, so you're not saying it's Lindstrom.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just looking for that. Just be not noticeable, and that means he's doing his job.
Absolutely. That article you reference, I always feel bad about it because I wrote it, and then pretty much from that point on, his game just kind of went.
No.
So I feel like I definitely jinxed him. But yeah, looking forward to a bounce back season from you, Gus. Logan, what does Lindstrom have to do to hold down a spot in the Red Wings lineup this season?
I think he has to be on the same page with the coaching staff. I think they obviously they know he's not an offensive guy. They don't expect that of him. And for them to all be on the same page about the role that they want him to fill could be a really important thing. I was thinking about Derek Lalonde, his experience in Tampa Bay, actually, someone that Tampa had up until recently, Jan Ruda, on the right side, who played with a bunch of different guys, but with Hedman sometimes, which is kind of surprising because you have this person that a lot of hockey fans wouldn't even recognize the name, playing with one of the best defenders in the league. But he just did the little things. You didn't notice him, didn't hear his name a lot, because if you got the puck, he played hot potato and got rid of it right away. But he was effective. He was quiet. He was good. And that's what they need from Gus. I think I don't expect him to play with any top guy right away, probably third line because of the other guys we've talked about on the right side pushing him down. But that could actually work out in his favor if Simon Edmondson makes the team out of camp. Because then he kind of has his left-handed guy in a pairing that he can, if he can be that shutdown guy to let Edmondson just kind of do whatever he wants and pinch in on the play sometimes, pinch in on offense, that could work out really well. And maybe Lindstrom will get a lot of extra minutes just because he plays well with Edmondson. Who knows? Maybe they establish that chemistry. I think he just needs to know what the team wants from him. And if he gets paired up with a youngster, just lock down on defense, do everything he can to just insulate that 19-year-old kid, give him a better chance. Yeah.
I love the Jan Ruda comparison. That's a player that kind of came to mind when I was thinking about this question. And then the other part of it is, do either of you know which player Simon Edmondson was compared to a lot in his draft year?
Hedman.
Victor Hedman. So the fact you bring up Jan Ruda, who was Hedman's partner, I think that there's something to be said there. But let's go off the rush. Let's get some chances off the rush here, gentlemen. And we're doing it a little bit different this time, folks. This is the first time that my line mates here have no idea what I'm going to ask them. So their answers are going to be off the cuff. We'll see if they embarrass themselves at all. No pressure. Question number 1, same rules, 2 sentences or less. And we're going to start with you, Logan. Will Pius Suter be traded by the season's end?
No. There's some other guys who are going to be pushed in for his spot, but I think he'll be good enough. I think he'll stay.
All right. Matt, what do you think?
Ooh, I'm going to say yes. I think he's going to, because I have high hopes for Rasmussen taking his spot. And so, yeah, I'm going to say he's going to be traded. If not at the deadline, it'll be at the end of the season for sure.
I think that's where I'm at. You've got Veleno, you've got Rasmussen, you've got Casper coming up. You got to make room for these guys somehow. I think Suter's going to get moved. Question number 2, and I'll go first this time. Who do you think Gustav Lindstrom's most frequent defensive partner will be this season? I think it's going to be Edvinsson. Matt?
I was going to say Edvinsson too. I think he's making the team, and he'd be a perfect, like we've said, perfect partner for him.
Logan?
I just want to switch it up. What could I do? I'm going to say Jake Wallman.
Okay.
He'll come back partway through the year and he'll lock down the spot. That's my prediction, just for fun, just to differentiate myself.
That was the pairing at the end of this past season, so there is some some history there. Good call. All right, good job with the first go around of the rush. Now let's put a pause on this show and let's pay some bills, gentlemen. This is a reminder that today's show is brought to you by The Morning Skate, a daily newsletter sent straight to your inbox that is filled with all sorts of hockey-related goodies. I get jittery just thinking about it. There's a link down in the description for you to go sign up. Go check it. It's down there. And while you're down there, be sure to give us a like, subscribe if you're new around here, welcome. And be sure to leave a comment down there and let us know if you think Pius Suter is going to be trade bait at the 2023 trade deadline. All right. Now, let's start the second half of today's show by recapping some current events. Last week, Matt knows this very well, the Vancouver Canucks signed JT Miller to a 7-year deal with an average annual value, or AAV, of $8 million. Additionally, as I referenced in my one good, one bad, the Ottawa Senators signed Tim Stutzle to an 8-year pact with an AAV of $8.35 million. Now, what does all of this have to do with the Red Wings? Well, I kind of alluded to it with my one bad. As we all know, Detroit is still grinding away, as we do on this show, we grind away at an extension for Captain Dylan Larkin. When we discussed his extension a few weeks ago, we all seemed to kind of agree that his number AAV would come in around $8 million, give or take $500,000, as you could give or take that much money. So my question, exactly. So my question now is that with these new deals being filed, have recent extensions signed by Miller and Stutzle altered the landscape in any way in terms of what Larkin's next deal will look like? Logan, I want to start with you on this one.
I honestly don't think they did change the market for Larkin very much. I think they were, the Miller extension was in line with market value, honestly. Kind of like when you look at the Kadri deal, it's not that far off, and I think Miller deserves more money than Kadri.
Yeah.
And so in that case, the Canucks are really betting on him being excellent for the first 4 years, 3-4 years, and then being okay for the last bit. And then in the Stutzle case, that's a lot of money for, is he 20? And he's had like 58 points last year, I think, but he's looking good. He's improving. I feel safe betting on a breakout from him, but the Senators are counting on him being okay for the first year or two and then being excellent for the last half. And then Larkin is kind of in between them age-wise. And I think that his contract, they expect him to be like a top 3 player on the team for the duration of the contract. So it's a little bit different, the valuation. They're not overpaying at the end. They're not overpaying at the start. They're just going to be paying for how good they think he is and hope that he will be and probably should be for 7-8 years. I don't think it'll change the deal too much. As long as the deal's under 9 million, Red Wings fans should honestly just count their lucky stars. And Yzerman would be really happy with that too, I'm sure. But that won't look that bad 4 or 5 years from now if the cap actually does go up someday, like it's supposed to. Especially since when that goes up, that'll kind of be when the Red Wings are ready to seriously contend for the cup. So, yeah.
I like your explanation of kind of how Larkin's in the middle of the two, where, Stutzle is getting overpaid at first and then getting potentially underpaid. And then Miller's getting paid and then he's overpaid at the end. And then Larkin, exactly. And then I do want to kind of throw my 2 cents in there. I do think, I kind of already said it, but I think that the Stutzle deal is probably a really solid framework for what Lucas Raymond might get when he's doing extension a year from now. Obviously there's some variables there. Stutzle's a center. He's played more games. Raymond's a winger. Blah 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 blah. But I do think that that's more or less what they're going to be looking at. Matt, obviously you covered the Canucks here at THW, so you know all the little nuances that went into this Miller deal. Can you find any similarities between the Larkin and Miller negotiations? And do you think that these recent deals have affected the Larkin negotiations?
Well, a lot of what Logan said is exactly what I'm pretty much going to say in different words. But, JT Miller is, like I say, he's getting paid for what he is now. And what he will be in the next 3 or 4 years. For Stutzle, you're paying for potential. I mean, you're paying for what he's going to be rather than what he is now. And that's what a lot of those contracts are for these young guys. If you're going long term, you're hoping that they're going to be really good down the line, because right now Stutzle's not worth $8 million. I mean, who's paying $8 million for 56 points? I mean, you're paying $8 million for 80 plus to me, but you're hoping that that's what he's going to hit, and his talent level, he probably will. So the thing is with Larkin, like you say, it's hard because he's right in the middle of those two. Like, he's already kind of hit what you think he's going to be for the next few years, while he's not old like Miller, in the fact that hoping that down the line all of a sudden you're like, what the heck, why are we paying this guy this much money? So I mean, yeah, like Logan said, $8 million is definitely what he's worth right now. So if he gets paid this, and then later on, maybe he has potential to go up a little more, he's still worth that money. So it's kind of a yes and no that it does affect, it doesn't affect, because they're two different players at two different points in their career. So looking at it that way, I'm actually looking at Miller's is actually pretty good, especially when he'll probably hit 80 plus points again next season. So in Larkin's case, 8 million is definitely, like we said, is a good number. I don't think these deals, Yzerman's kind of looking at it and going, well, this is what it is. So I think he's probably looking at that number. So I'm going to say yes and no. So
sure. I think if you're keeping the Canucks Red Wings connection going, I feel like if Bo Horvat gets a big money extension this offseason, that could be bigger for Larkin. Larkin is better than Horvat, but they play a more similar role. They're both the captains of their team. They've been there since the draft.
Similar age too, right?
Yeah, I think Horvat's just a year older. So maybe you look at Horvat's number and then you just add $1 million to it or something.
Something
like maybe that's what Larkin will do.
The same question when Horvat signed, if Horvat signed before Larkin, that is.
Yeah. I also think just something that I've been thinking about recently that maybe is maybe one of the bigger holdups with this Larkin thing is Larkin's never been a point per game player. His highest point total has been 73, and that was set in 2019, I'm pretty sure. And you look at that and you go, why would I pay Larkin $8 million when JT Miller's getting that and he just had a 90-point season? Like, that's not equivalent. However, I do think that Larkin's due for probably his best season ever this year, with all the added talent, with all, he's gonna be one of the most important players on the team, as he has been, but now he's got kids to play, or he's got players to play with. I think, not to get ahead of ourselves, because we're going to be talking about Larkin in the coming weeks, but I think he's going to have a career year, and I think that that gives him some negotiating power for sure. You're, like Logan said, you're buying prime years here. You're not talking about tailing off at the end, or you're not talking about underperforming the cap hit up front. You're getting what you've gotten plus maybe more, because he might see a boost to his production. So we'll see. This is an ongoing situation, and of course we'll talk about it once a number finally comes in, even if it happens a year from now. Holy cow.
And also in Miller's case, just quickly, in Miller's case, we don't, the NHL in general, we don't know if he's going to hit 90 plus points again.
Yeah, for sure.
I think paying for the 70 plus is what really you're looking at. But
yeah. All right, now let's venture over to our comment corner, as we like to do, and check in on a question from a good friend of the show. Hi, Paradox. Paradox Destroyer asks, how many other teams besides Tampa Bay and the Red Wings have an assistant slash associate coach who has spent time as a head coach in the NHL? And does that make a difference? Now, thank you for the question, Paradox. We love talking with you. And before I let my line mates answer your question, I'll quickly list off some teams that are employing former head coaches in an assistant complementary role, whatever you want to call it. We've got the Boston Bruins with Joe Sacco. We've got the Chicago Blackhawks with Derek King, the Edmonton Oilers with Glenn Galitzin, Nashville Predators with Todd Richards, the New Jersey Devils with Andrew Brunette, and the Vancouver Canucks with Mike Yeo, and many others that I am not listing. So it's a longer list than that. Matt, been talking about the Canucks. Might as well, continue with the flow here. Clearly, there are plenty of teams that employ former head coaches in an assistant capacity. Do you think that makes a difference?
That's a difficult question. The thing is it depends on if the coach, the actual head coach, have a good relationship. Because if they don't, you can butt heads. Because one is used to being, well, obviously is the head coach, and the other one was one. So it's like, it's kind of hard for them to kind of, I don't know. Again, we don't know these people's personalities, but if they could fit together, they're fine. And they could make like two head coaches and like for the two-headed head coach, if that makes sense. But, but if they don't get along, and I'm sure they wouldn't hire them if they didn't get along, you can have some problems with philosophy on what can and won't, can and can't work, that type of thing. But I think it does make a difference because there's a lot of experience. I mean, this guy, whoever it is has run a bench before. They've had either most of the time have had success as well. A lot of the veteran coaches have had success in the NHL as head coaches before. I think it really adds to whoever the head coach is. So in the case in Vancouver, Bruce Boudreau is obviously has been a head coach most of his career. I think actually all of his career. I think he's ever been an assistant.
You're right about that.
I believe so. So you're looking at that, and then you got Mike Yeo, who's kind of bounced around that. He's been used to being an assistant coach. He's also been a head coach. So he's in both roles. I think if Boudreau would become an assistant, I think it would be harder for him because he's not used to that. He's used to being the guy in control, while Yeo has been an assistant coach before. So maybe it's easier for him to shift to that. And I think that's the main case in any case in this head coach, assistant coach dynamic. So I'll just leave it at that. If people could follow that thought process, that is.
Two things. One, I think back to, before last year when the Canucks did hire Boudreau, I remember reading a lot of stuff about how the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least their fans, really wanted to see them hire Boudreau as an assistant. Obviously, that didn't happen. And I think that maybe one of the reasons why it didn't happen is because Bruce is used to being a head coach. He doesn't maybe have interest in being an assistant unless like there's a clear path to maybe being the head coach at some point. So I think that's one of the reasons why that didn't come to fruition. And then you talk about how like maybe they might butt heads, maybe there's a difference of philosophy, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that they butt heads per se, but it does remind me of the dynamic with Jeff Blashill and Dan Bilesma. And the reason why I bring that up is because when, a year ago when Blashill was extended, that came with the news that Bilesma left. And I took that to mean that Bilesma kind of took the job thinking he would be Blashill's successor. And so when Blashill was extended, Bilesma was like, all right, clearly I don't have this job. Time for me to go find a new opportunity. And I think that can be a case in a lot of these situations where some of these guys sign on kind of with their eyes kind of looking at the head coaching spot and thinking, all right, if something happens, I'm the next guy up. So I do think that situation happens. I'm not saying that's the situation with all of these situations, but I do think that can be a consideration. Logan, obviously the Red Wings have Bob Boughner on Derek Lalonde's coaching staff, who has former head coaching experience. What kind of benefits are there in having a veteran coach on staff, especially when the head coach is a first timer like Lalonde is?
It's a good question. That's kind of the only thing I could think of when I'm thinking of the benefits. Like you say experience or they know what it takes, but these coaches are good coaches. You don't make it to the NHL without being a good coach. Like Derek Lalonde has been a head coach before a lot, just not in the NHL. I think the fact that he has someone with that experience as he comes in could be helpful. My guess of the biggest learning curve, the biggest difference between being like an AHL head coach or an NHL assistant and an NHL head coach is the publicity. The level of scrutiny is a lot higher. So maybe just having someone who's been through that to be able to talk to you about it and to give you some tips on what to say to shut down reporters or something. I don't know. Maybe just call up John Tortorella and learn a couple one-liners. But I don't know. Other than that, I don't think it's actually that big of a deal to have those people because they're all professionals. You're not the second head coach if you're the assistant coach. You're not. You're the assistant coach. You have your role, and often they're very specialized. It's like you focus on special teams.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's your job now. It's not to try to manage the entire team like the head coach is doing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it makes that big of a difference other than maybe those people when they were head coaches learned from their assistant coaches and can just kind of build on their experience that way. That's the biggest reason I think it's helpful in my opinion.
Yeah, there's definitely instances where some coaches just click together. Like I think of John Tortorella, Mike Sullivan, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, was an assistant for Tortorella for a while. And then at some point, obviously Sullivan got the Penguins gig. And I think that sometimes you see that where sometimes coaches just mesh well together, even though, maybe the one has had head coaching experience, but like they just work well together with this other guy. And then there's other guys that don't have experience, but like they've been an assistant with this guy forever. So they just work well together. Sometimes it just comes down to the dynamics between the head coach and the people he's working with. There's a lot of examples of that. But yeah, good stuff, gentlemen. And with that, we are off on the rush. It happens that quickly, folks. First question, Logan, we're going to start with you again. Will Dylan Larkin sign before the season starts?
Like before the regular season, the first game starts, correct? Yes. That's your parameters? Yes. I think he'll do it in training camp.
All right. Matt, what do you think?
I'm going to say the same thing. And it's the same thing with Horvat and Vancouver. I think they're both going to sign before the season starts. I just don't think they want to have that hanging over their head throughout the season.
I would not be surprised if the home opener starts off with some good news, and that good news is that Dylan Larkin has signed an 8-year extension. It's going to be great. Next question. Matt, we're going to start with you on this one. If the Grand Rapids Griffins, I like this question. If the Grand Rapids Griffins were to make a coaching change, this sometimes happens, which Red Wings assistant coach would you hire for the job? Bob Boughner, Alex Tanguay, or Jay Verity, who was the former head coach of the Tucson Roadrunners?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to say Verity because he's AHL before. I wouldn't probably throw an assistant like Tanguay down there. So I'm going to say Verity.
Logan, what do you think?
I'd go with Tanguay. I feel like as a former player trying to get into the coaching biz, he's got the assistant coaching job, but sometimes having experience as a head coach is even more valuable. So I think he'd be excited about that chance.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tanguay too. And the example I'm going to give is Jeff Blashill. When he started on Mike Babcock's staff, went down to the Griffins, won a Calder Cup, and then earned his job as the head coach of the Red Wings. That's exactly what you would do with Alex Tanguay. All right, that's it. Good job, you guys. You survived without knowing what I was going to ask you. Kudos to both of you. That is our show. Thank you to Matt and Logan for joining me for today's show. Like I always love to say, I literally couldn't have done it without you. And thank you for tuning in. Be sure to sign up for the morning, not the afternoon, the morning skate. Details are down in the description. And while you're down there, be sure to give this video a like. Follow the channel if you haven't already. I mean, come on, you enjoyed this show, right? Come on, give us a follow. We do this every week. And drop a comment down below and let us know your final predictions for Larkin's next contract. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love hanging out with all of you, and we hope to see you again next week.